I'm sure you all have heard about the Indo-European languages. It's a language family that English belongs to, as well as most European languages. In fact, over 3.2 billion people speak of Indo-European language, which is over 40% of the world's population. So let's dig into the connections of the Indo-European languages and how these connections were found. Alright, so the story starts in the 16th and 17th centuries. European scholars and linguists were traveling to the Indian subcontinent, and they noticed striking similarities between some of the local languages and European languages. So based on all these similarities, they concluded that all these languages must have had a common ancestor in ancient times. The topic reappeared in 1786 when William Jones, a British linguist, first lectured on the major similarities among three of the oldest languages known in his time, which were Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit. 30 years later, in 1813, Thomas Young, a British polymath, coined the term Indo-European, which referred to these languages with common similarities in Eurasia. More work was done in the mid-1800s by Franz Bopp, a German linguist who compared Sanskrit grammar with Greek, Latin, Persian, and Germanic, which refers to the Germanic languages. This work was done through comparative linguistics, in which we can view common grammatic features as well as common vocabulary and reconstruct a hypothetical proto-ancestor. So the ancestral language of the Indo-European languages is called Proto-Indo-European, or I'll be calling it PIE. Alright, so let's take a look at some common Indo-European words and see their hypothetical reconstructions in Proto-Indo-European. For these 7 words here, you can probably see a trend, especially for the first 2, such as mother and father. We can see that the Sanskrit words are actually pretty conservative when compared to the Proto-Indo-European. As you make your way down, you tend to notice some differences in some consonants, noticeably the last word for cow, which in Proto-Indo-European would be reconstructed as gos. Notice that in Germanic, such as English and Old English, the hard g sound becomes a soft k. But when you go south, down to Latin and Greek, the g sounds becomes a b. Now, if you dig deep into shared Proto-Indo-European vocabulary and grammar, you'll notice many different consonantal shifts, although I'm not going to be digging into them in this video because it can get very, very advanced. If you are interested in learning more about Proto-Indo-European vocabulary and grammar, I definitely recommend reading How to Kill a Dragon by Calvert Watkins. It's a very, very advanced book, but you will learn so much about the topic. Alright, so having seen the commonalities between Proto-Indo-European and the Indo-European languages, this really raises the question on PIE and its origins, as well as the people who spoke it in the beginning. So, who were the Proto-Indo-Europeans, and what do we know about their culture? So from the archaeological and linguistic records, we know that PIE was spoken as a single language between 4500 and 2500 BC. This was a few millennia before the first attestation of an Indo-European language, which was Hittite, first attested around 1700 BC in cuneiform. There have been many hypotheses about the origins of the Proto-Indo-Europeans, such as the Anatolian hypothesis, which states that they may have originated around Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, although the most widely accepted theory is the Kurgan hypothesis. The Kurgan hypothesis was first put forward in 1956 by Marija Gimbutas, a Lithuanian archaeologist and anthropologist. It states that the original PIE speakers would have originated in the Pontic-Caspian steppes, which is north of the Black Sea. Based on the archaeological record, they would have been the producers of the Yamnaya culture, who inhabited the region between 3300 to 2600 BC. In addition to this theory, they were nomadic pastoralists who first domesticated the horses and used wagons and chariots. This would have allowed them to migrate across large areas of land, and this migration was called the Indo-European migrations, and this ranged from about 4000 to 1000 BC. How and why did PIE spread? Centuries of population growth, changes in climate, and technological advancements may have led the PIE speakers of the Yamnaya culture to migrate out. Notice that the distribution of Indo-European languages favors migrations out west. This was due to the flow of water, as water sources are vital. The most reliable way to stay close to water sources was to follow the edge of mountains, where runoff from snowmelt formed streams. They couldn't go east, as it would enter the mountains, which were difficult and dangerous, and the steppes were arid. The western steppes, on the other hand, are lower and less arid. This could explain why there was more westward migrations than towards east. This could also explain why most of the Indo-European languages are found in Europe. Now, while the majority of the Proto-Indo-Europeans went west, as we saw in the beginning of this video, there are many Indo-European languages in South Asia as well as the Middle East, So for that reason, we do know that there were many groups of Proto-Indo-Europeans who made their ways south and then east. The Indo-Europeans who made their way south into present-day Iran were known as the Indo-Iranians. They reached there around the 2nd millennia BCE, and the language from the Indo-Iranians later evolved into Persian, aka Farsi. Now, the migrations into the Indian subcontinent were known as the Indo-Aryan migrations. The Indo-Aryans were an offshoot of the Indo-Iranians, and they introduced Sanskrit to the Indian subcontinent. So one interesting thing about the Indo-Aryan migrations is that they were attributed to the 4.2 kiloyear event. But the 4.2 kiloyear event was a severe climatic event which occurred around 2000 BC and may have caused the collapse of the Old Kingdom in Egypt, the Akkadian Empire in Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley Civilization. This event also may have caused the aridization of the Eurasian steppes, and this would have caused water shortages, requiring the need to migrate east in order to survive. Interestingly, the Indo-Aryans actually referred to themselves as Aryans. The term Arya actually means noble or honorable in Proto-Indo-European. This term frequently appears in Vedic Sanskrit texts, particularly the Rig Veda, where the Indo-Aryans distinguished themselves from the local inhabitants of the Indian subcontinent. So the term Arya was not racial or ethnic, but rather a cultural and linguistic identity. So random fact, actually the name Iran comes from the word Aryan, and this makes sense because Persian is an Indo-European language. It's amazing how each civilization evolved to be so distinct, yet they share traces of a Proto-Indo-European ancestor. Keep in mind though that these changes occurred over many millennia, and different groups of Indo-Europeans settled in different areas, sometimes mixing with or replacing the local populations. What are the closest languages to Proto-Indo-European? This is a loaded question because there is no identical or direct descendant of Proto-Indo-European, although some Indo-European languages preserve archaic features of PIE, such as complex verb conjugation, case systems, and rich inflectional morphology. Classical languages that preserve some of these archaic features and have been used to help reconstruct PIE are Avestan, the liturgical language of the Zoroastrians, as well as Sanskrit. Among modern languages, I've actually heard that Lithuanian and Latvian of the Baltic branch have preserved some of the more archaic Indo-European features. Reconstructing Proto-Indo-European Society. So this concludes the basics of the Proto-Indo-Europeans, although there is so much more that could be discussed. By reconstructing Proto-Indo-European, historians and linguists have actually been able to reconstruct so many aspects of Proto-Indo-European society. Aspects such as religion, social hierarchy, poetics, and even personal names. The main sources used for reconstructing Indo-European have been early Indo-European texts. These include the Rig Vedas in Sanskrit, the Avestas in Avestan, which are the liturgical texts for the Zoroastrians, even epics by Homer in ancient Greek. While we never may discover the full details of Proto-Indo-European society, we have been able to tell so much just from linguistics, archaeology, and genetics. Well, that wraps up this video. In future videos, I will be discussing more about Proto-Indo-European society in depth, because there's so much to discuss and it's going to require many different videos. It's a super fascinating topic. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you for watching. Support us by downloading LinguaBerry to learn a new language. LinguaBerry seamlessly integrates reading, writing, and memorization into an engaging and interactive language learning experience. Now available in the App Store and Google Play. Tutorial in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching. Until next time.